I use those elk hunters to my advantage.
Spotters.
You bet. I talk to them all the time. And,
pack in away from everyone and have a pack of wolves run all your elk stuff.
absolutely. Yep,
It happens.
it does. Probably one I get a lot of complaints about is like Region G in Wyoming.
Welcome to the Built to Hunt podcast, brought to you by the team of hunt advisors at the Huntin magazine, where we are dedicated to helping our members go on more hunts with better information. Join Huntin today at huntinfool.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Built to Hunt podcast. Isaiah Jonah here today with Garth Jensen and Logan Hedges. And as the season approaches, we want to bring you another podcast to talk about realistic hunting expectations while you're out in the field. I mean, it's something that we're hearing a lot more on every year. What's an issue, what's not an issue. So hopefully we can break it down a little and help you figure out why you're seeing more people.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of people that get pretty frustrated at times. I mean, I've been there, and I don't know. I guess I don't personally let it bother me much anymore. I just like to go and hunt and be out there. But there is a lot of people that get frustrated with some of these hunts.
Yeah, and it's coming from I get it coming from a new hunter that might not have the experience in the field and doesn't really know what to expect. Once they get out there, and then all of a sudden they're like, holy shit, this trailhead has 15 trucks and there's horse trailers and there's this and there's that, and then you start looking, well, half of them are Subarus, so they're probably not competing for the same thing you're competing for.
Yeah.
But it's what's funny is the older hunters now that are getting to that same frustration level where it's like, well, I never had to used to have to deal with all this nonsense over in this. There was never anybody up in this country when I was hunting 10, 15 years ago.
Yep.
So it's old hunters and new hunters alike that are kind of starting to bubble over a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I see it up there where I'm at in Wyoming all the time. And,
I'll bet.
Gosh, everybody, all the local boys blame the non-residents, and the non-residents are all the damn local boys. There's no limited tags for them. And so, yeah, it's a back and forth all the time. And I don't know. I just go and hunt anymore. I think that's the best advice I can give anybody is just go hunt. Try to enjoy it for what it is. And if you can get away from people, great. If not, I try to use them to my advantage at times. There's a bunch of guys hunting here. If I was those deer or elk or whatever, where would I be?
Yeah.
And maybe make that adjustment while I'm hunting.
No, it doesn't do us as hunters any good to get after each other for the problem that's been created. But, I mean, a lot of it comes back to residents, because if you look at quotas across the states, Montana, Idaho made a big change, but they're not it's not like there's an increase in non-resident tags in these states. A lot of the increase is coming from new resident hunters.
Yep.
I mean, we saw this huge push with COVID, people fleeing from these cities, wanting to get out. I mean, look at Idaho. I mean, I know Boise just blew up.
Yeah.
Montana Bozeman. I mean, I think Montana said they sold 5,000 more resident combo tags this year over last year.
Yeah, and it can't be because 5,000 more residents woke up and said, I think I'm going to hunt this year.
Yep.
No.
Yeah.
No, and it's, I mean, I think it's where the issue comes from. It's not that there's just more non-residents pouring into all these states, because we're the ones with the cap on the quota and the amount of tags. So, but at the end of the day, too, I mean, technology has become more advanced. I mean, more guys are in the backcountry movement, wanting to pack in. You got pack goats and llamas, and
it's easier.
Easier. I mean, we have digital platforms that allow us to scout better. I mean, you might have had a sweet honey hole in G that no one knew about, but then some guy's scrolling across Onyx and he's like, hey, check this basin out. Like, I can get in there. And so I think it's a lot of little things combined that has made it a bigger issue than what it really needs to be.
Yeah, and for the most part, I guess you can tell that we're talking about overcrowding as one of the, expectations and perceptions that people have going into the field, which quite honestly is the biggest one. That's the one that I feel like people are more so worried about than trophy quality. And I mean, I can tell you, I've almost got to the same place as Logan where, yeah, I deal with it and it's frustrating, but I've had so many, quote, sweet spots that aren't sweet spots anymore.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, well, I was looking for a sweet spot when I found that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's going to be another one, and just you might only have it for a year. You might have it for 5 years.
Yeah. And it may go back and forth.
Yeah,
Well,
you might
everything's
go
on a
back to
cycle,
another
for
one.
sure.
I got places up there where I live that, man, there's years we go and hunt a couple years ago, and there was a pretty good buck that we all knew about, and man, and I was fingers crossed, hoping there wouldn't be too many people there, and man, it was loaded opening morning, and fortunate enough we did get him killed, but it was a lot of times that doesn't happen, and the next year was like, I thought about going back there and stuff, and finally kind of decided to do it a last minute type of deal. We were kind of busy with another hunt. There wasn't anybody there, but I think everybody had the same idea that it was bad the year before, so everybody kind of got mad, and I ain't going back there. There's going to be a lot of people. Man, we had it all to ourselves.
Yeah.
So.
Jared and I talk about that a lot, like the general areas we hunt in Montana. I always say, man, the years where there's the most people there, the next year's probably going to be good because everyone's going to be sick and tired of everyone hunting on top of them.
A bad taste in your mouth. So.
And that kind of comes back to that expectations. Like if you had expectations when you went into that trailhead that there was going to be a pile of people in there.
Yep.
Like, what are you out? Like you knew that was going to go on.
Yep.
Now, if you had those expectations that there was going to be piles of people in there, then you get there and no one's there, you're like, hot diggity damn.
Yep.
This is the best thing ever. But if you do the opposite and think, I'm going to be the only one that knows about this buck, and nobody else is going to be here competing for that, and you get there and there's 5 trucks at the trailhead, like you're deflated.
Yeah.
You're defeated before you ever get into the field. Then every single person you run into, you're probably going to have a sour taste in your mouth. And then even if that person is on another ridge, he's competing for your buck. Like, he knows he's there. He's going after. We got to do something.
Yep.
And then you start making decisions on your hunt based off of what you think might happen or someone could have seen that animal, which, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have some of those thoughts go through your head, but you don't want to plan your entire stock and hunt around those.
No. The other thing, too, is, I remind myself of this, and I tell guys it all the time. I'm like, usually where there's lots of animals, there's going to be lots of hunters.
Yep.
There's a reason there's not hunter crowding in wilderness areas because there's not a lot of animals back there.
Yeah.
The easy to get to big herds, it's noticeable. Like, people figure it out. So I always tell some of my best hunts have been at full trailheads, or it forces you to think outside the box and go somewhere else, and you might find your new sweet spot. But if there's a lot of animals, there's typically going to be a lot of hunters to go along with it.
And maybe at some point in time you have that realization or that real conversation with yourself. It's like, you know what? I would rather have fewer animals but fewer hunters. Or I would rather be chasing the biggest animals or the most animals, but I'm going to have to deal with more hunters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And kind of come to that understanding of what you want as an individual, because at the end of the day, that hunt is basically what you make of it.
Yeah.
Not what Joe made of it,
Yep.
that's on his horse, that beat you up the trailhead, that went in there the day before you, and now in your mind, he scared every animal out of those basins, and he's ruined it, and now that's a wash. That's a terrible place to go. You ruined that hunt, not Joe.
Yep. Well, and you got to put everything in perspective. Is this an over-the-counter tag you just went and picked up 2 days before you went hunting? What do you expect out of that, really? You know, go work hard, have a good time, and hunt it for what it is. If it's something you've built points for 20, 25 years, you got to have a little different perspective on that. You should be, this should be a hunt where there's not a ton of people. I can actually go and glass these basins and maybe try to kill more of a quality animal type of deal. So it's you got to put that into perspective a little bit of what type of hunt is this.
Yeah. And that's one thing to make note of. When you are investing that kind of point or a higher number of point total into your hunt, and you're going on that hunt, you might want to invest a little more into research and finding out if there's any overlapping hunts that are taking place during yours. Because the worst thing ever, is, let's say a guy draws a third season rifle deer tag and spends 18 points on it, shows up, and guess what? Every other elk hunter that wanted to see the Gunnison Basin showed up and is hunting the exact same basin you are.
Yep.
And guess what? They got a doe hunt, they got a cow hunt, they got a bull hunt, and you're not the only gig in town.
Yep.
But you are the only one that spent 15 to 18 years applying for that. Those other guys just grab the tag and win.
Yeah. You looked at it and said, man, there's only going to be 25 deer hunters in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not the case. See, there may be 25 buck hunters in there, but it's there's a lot of other guys.
2,500 elk hunters.
Yeah, exactly. And same thing right there. It's all about expectations. You got a choice then. You can whine and complain about it and be mad about it. Or one thing that I found, especially hunting in Colorado on some of those hunts, I like to hunt mule deer down there. I use those elk hunters to my advantage.
Spotters.
You bet. I talk to them all the time. And I mean, it's never failed. If you've got a deer tag, you run into elk.
Yeah.
And if you got an elk tag, you run into a big deer somewhere. So I always talk to those guys. I did it again this year. Some guys told me where they'd seen some deer, and I ended up killing a deer pretty close to that area that they told me they'd seen quite a few in. So, yeah, I mean, kind of don't get too upset about it. It may not be as cloudy as you think it is.
Yeah.
And another big thing, I mean, Mother Nature can play a big part in it. You have a burn in the unit. If it snows a pile and you can't get into the high country and it concentrates everyone to the lower stuff. I mean, Montana, this was the worst year I've ever seen it for archery elk hunting. And it was so dry, I saw hundreds of elk on private, down in the ag and the water and everything. And I just think a lot of those elk had moved where they didn't have water down to the low stuff. So it forces people to hunt the same areas. I mean, eastern Montana, they didn't have rain all summer, and everyone was like, the deer hunting's terrible. Well, if you ended up on private, it was probably the best hunt you ever had because that's where all the deer were. So, at some point, Mother Nature plays a part in it where if you know how to adapt, you're going to be adapting with everyone else that's figured it out as well. So,
Yeah, that's part of hunting. You got to be able to adapt. I mean, everything that hunts out there does it. I mean, from the deer and elk, I mean, they got to adapt to what they're eating and drinking. Like this year on a dry year, water was a really big factor. Your mountain lions,
Oh yeah.
they're not going to sit up there high where there's no game and try to catch a squirrel once in a while. I mean, they're going to move with the deer and elk.
Yep. Well, let me ask you this then: if you get to a situation where most all the elk are basically concentrated into certain areas around water, ag, private, what have you, can you get away from it if you don't want that hunter crowding? Like, can you get into different areas? I mean, what are you going to sacrifice? I mean,
I went into a lot of areas where there was no people, but there was also no elk there. No, and I mean, I bounced around almost every other day checking out new spots.
Yep.
I mean, they were all equally as bad. And as soon as you get back down in the valley, I mean, there's ranches that year after year have 100, 200 elk on them. There was 500 elk there this year.
yeah.
And I just think, early on there was probably elk in those spots, but with the hunt pressure and then no water and stuff, they decided to move 10 miles and go hang out in the farmer's field that's not hunting them.
Yeah, yeah, you bet. And it's green.
Yeah.
The feed dried up this year, and that's just one factor. Next year may be completely different.
It might be wet, green, and elk are scattered from hell to breakfast.
Yep, really, really spread out, and the hunting's great.
Yep.
So that's always things you got to factor in, and man, that's why it's called hunting and not killing. You just got to go out there and hunt it for what it is, and every year an adventure is going to be a little different.
Well, and that's just it. That's where I think expectations come into play, and maybe priorities. Figure out why you're out there. Like, are you out there to kill a giant animal? But, like, is that what's going to dictate if that's a good hunt or not?
Yeah.
Or is getting out there and just maybe finding a new spot, finding an animal, like running tracks for days on end until you finally catch up to it. Is that what you want to do? Like, you have to figure out and prioritize what that hunt is supposed to mean to you. And if it's the biggest animal or killing the biggest animal you can, and you want to have some type of an epic hunt every single time you go out, your priorities are a little skewed. Like, if you can't hire an outfitter or spend exuberant amount of time in the field, scouting that unit, figuring out. And then guess what? As soon as the opening day comes, you have 5 trucks at the trailhead.
Yeah, you bet.
That animal's blown into the next basin, and you're starting from ground one again. Well, if all your hopes and dreams were pitted on killing that animal, you've just had a terrible hunt. And you're going to go home licking your wounds, saying how bad it was, and you're going to be one of those guys that's like, it sucked. Everything was terrible. There was people everywhere. They were all over my hunting spot. They screwed up my hunt. Chances are you probably screwed up their hunt.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it goes both ways.
Yep.
So if you can sort your priorities out and just be like, man, I'm just going to adapt what Mother Nature throws at me. I had this plan, but actually getting out and exploring and figuring these things out. Like if you have to have the biggest buck or bull in the world, hire a guide.
Yeah.
Like that's going to be a nice little shortcut to maybe help you.
You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't think in a lot of these areas that I hunt, like you're ever going to get away from people. But you, like you said, you adapt. Like if everyone's camping at the trailhead in their campers, then maybe you should camp 2 miles back in, like not on top of the elk, but where you're a mile ahead of everyone, or get up earlier and get in there in the dark and figure stuff out, or talk to people. I mean, I hate talking to people, but a lot of times you could, you guys, hey, why don't you go up this drainage? I'll go up this drainage. Like one of us is going to bump them. Like,
well, yeah, be about half human about it instead of just,
Yeah.
There's times when I was younger, I was just what Gar said, man. It was all about killing the biggest thing.
Yeah.
But that was back when I had something to prove, and I don't have anything to prove now. Hell, I'm too old and slow anymore, so I'm just not going to do that. I want to go enjoy myself, and I enjoy talking to guys. I stop and talk to guys all the time. Hey, what are you guys looking for? And guys will be like, oh, we're just trying to kill if we could kill a 150, 160 buck, we'd be happy. And I'll be like, go try up that drainage right there. I just saw a couple of them earlier today.
Me. I'm like, me too.
Yeah. So
I just keep driving.
Yeah, but and that's all part of it anymore. It's kind of where you get in your life. But I mean, even then, don't let other people or the weather, anything, don't let any of that affect, your hunting and your attitude about that hunt.
Yeah.
Shoot, you could pack in away from everyone and have a pack of wolves run all your elk out.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yep.
It happens.
It does.
Like you can have the best laid out plans in the world from your computer, or even if you've been up there all year scouting and had it figured out, never fails. It all changes opening morning.
Yep.
So it just, honestly, if you get your expectations and you have it figured out right, then everything is good.
Yep.
Goose fraba.
Yeah.
no, I mean, I try to make plans A, B, and C, and sometimes I have plans that I don't even have plans for.
Yeah.
Like you have to adapt on the run. I mean, like I said, some of the best hunts I've had, like, or where you think you're not going to have a chance. There's like, man, there's 15 camps up this road.
Yep.
And then you might not end up seeing anyone. They might be hunting right from their camp, and you hike 2 miles in. And
Well, the thing I think about that I love, the hunting story that I always go back to is I've hiked in and I'm staying in this tent on a general deer hunt in Utah, and it's freaking never gets above freezing. The wind's howling, and I'm up in there because I'm like, I'm not going to see anybody. This is where I've seen deer the whole entire year. I've got them figured. I've got this batch of bucks, this batch of bucks, this batch of bucks. I'm up there freezing my ass off, sleeping with my water so it doesn't freeze at night, so I can actually have something to boil for oatmeal in the morning. Nothing. All the bucks are gone. They've taken off. They've headed down into pockets. I can't turn them up. I mean, I see glimpses of stuff. Meanwhile, Austin's waking up in his pajamas at 6 o'clock in the morning in his house and driving out. And all of a sudden, he's just driving through Main and Central, and a giant buck steps out.
Yep.
Boom. Shoots it. It's over. And it's like,
Yeah. Right place, right time. Yeah.
it happens.
It does. It happens. It's hunting. You just got to be out there. I mean, that's the biggest thing. You got to be out there, and everybody hunts a little different. I'm kind of the same way, especially back in the day, man. I was gung ho, man. We were getting far as back as we could, and man, there's been times it snowed me in, and all the animals were gone, and turned into a survival trip more than a hunting trip, and just trying to get out of there. So that's not always the best strategy. But yeah, just enjoy the hunt. That's the best advice I can give anybody, and be happy to be out there. So
Well, and looking the obvious, like that bull I shot in New Mexico, we had been hiking back into canyons and like not seeing a soul. I glassed that bull up from the main road, and for the half hour I watched him before dark the night before I shot him, there were 7 pickups that drove down that road. He was 1,200 yards from the main. No one stopped to glass.
yeah,
And he was out there on a wide open hillside where like everyone could have seen him. And like we just happened to be glassing in the right place at the right time, hiked in the next morning and shot him. But it's like sometimes looking in the most obvious places where you think, oh, there's nothing here, but
yeah.
it can happen.
Yep.
Some of the best spots I had in Colorado over the years were right off main. We would have our tripod set up right off the road, where anyone that came by could see exactly what we were looking at. But they'd just be like,
What are them idiots?
"What are
looking
you
at?
Yeah, you bet.
dumbasses doing?" And then just drive on by.
Yep.
But that was some of our best spots. Or we would park on the main road, walk 200 yards around the hill, and you're glassing something that nobody's looking at.
Yep, you bet. Everybody's driving right by.
Yeah.
So,
So,
yeah.
I mean, let me ask this question. We all know what is going to be crowded, right? You've got your general hunts, general Utah, obviously
Colorado.
over-the-counter Colorado.
Yep.
That's going to be crowded. Even your draw tags in Colorado
Oh,
have
yeah.
over-the-counter hunters
Well,
for
they-
other species.
They overlap, yeah. All the species overlap.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Your Montana hunt, your general hunts there, those are usually pretty packed, and you hear about crowding. But what are some hunts you guys have actually drawn where you're like, God, I got it. Finally, I've waited all these years. I pulled this tag. You
Alaska
get there.
mountain goat.
Yeah.
There was no one
Oh.
around.
yeah.
It's a little easier when you fly in.
Oh,
and
absolutely. Yeah, makes a big difference.
Okay, opposite end of the spectrum. Which one did you show up on where you're like, I finally got this tag, and there's people everywhere? This is like a general hunt in Montana, not a limited entry hunt in Arizona.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably one I get a lot of complaints about is like Region G in Wyoming
Yeah,
from the
because
non-residents.
it's 7 points.
Yeah, well, it took 8, I think, last year to draw, and it was, I mean, that's a lot of points. You
Yeah.
know, guys have, and then the non-residents come up there, and all the residents just flood. And I'm as bad as anybody, you know. We're all out there, and half the state of Wyoming's in G and H hunting,
Yeah.
and which I don't blame them. It's good hunting, and
Yeah.
and it opens early and everything. Nothing else going on, so everybody hits that country hard, and that's a perfect example right there. I mean, I've been on the opener in G almost since I was 14 years old, and man, there's times it's just like, what are we doing here? You know, I mean, I've sold out after a day or two, and a lot of people
Yeah.
do that, and man, a few days later, it's lights out hunting. You know, everybody does the same thing. Everybody gets frustrated and leaves. So, yeah, hang in there and just hunt.
Yeah.
And that,
avoid the weekends.
yeah, the weekend warriors are always bad, you know, especially the resident guys.
Yeah.
We just had that hunt in Colorado with my kid. I mean, we got there, and, man, I'd never seen so many people. You know, and
Yeah.
I've hunted that area before, and there was more tags than there had been, too. But, man, there was people everywhere where we ended up killing that deer at the end of the season. The first time we went to that trailhead, there was like 17, 18 trucks in that trailhead and unloading stuff, and it was like, man, you had to pay attention just driving up the gravel road, you know, and not to hit somebody. And the day that we killed it, which was the second to last day of the season, we were the only ones parked in that trailhead.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You sure you were within the season dates?
Well, we had to double check when we got there that morning, so I'm like, I better look this over. So, yeah, but it was, you know, that's what happens. Guys either fill up or, you know, they got to get back to work or,
Yeah.
you know, so we can always get better. So maybe it gets worse too, but, you know, a
Yeah.
lot of times if you can hang in there and you should figure it out and learn a little more too about the country that you're hunting in. It's not like the animals just sprouted wings and flew away. They're there somewheres. They just may be timbered up or pushed over to the next drainage, things
Yeah.
like that. You have to kind of make an audible and maybe change what you were originally going to do.
Yeah, I remember I had I drew both Arizona elk tags, I would say. I drew an archery elk tag over in 27. And looking at it face value, you're like, 275 tags.
Yep.
Like, yeah, it took me 13 years to get it at the time. So I was like, you know, I burned a lot of points, and this should be a really good hunt. I get there, and I'm lucky I had someone save me a camp spot.
Yeah.
I couldn't even find a place to pull over my jumping jack and throw that thing up.
Yep.
And there's like 7 guys in this little camping area. Everyone's running around. I mean, everyone's got an elk tag. There's a cow hunt going on. There's a bull hunt going on. Instead of like 275, there's more realistic like 500 elk hunters in there. So everyone's hunting elk. You can't hardly, like, every time you hear a bugle, you got to kind of take a second guess, like, wait, was that a bull or was that a person? So this is a tag I'd waited 13 years to draw. And honestly, I finally found a bull to hunt just because I stayed there the entire time, and then all of a sudden it got there later on in the week. Guys had left. People were thinning out a little bit. I glassed a bull up right outside the road. But, my hell, I was not expecting that much pressure when I got there. And then, like, my 8 hunt that I had, 500 tags. That should have been the first key, and, like, you're not the only one here. I've been on slower general season deer hunts than that. Like, I can tell you what, from what I saw in that unit the first 3 days, comparatively speaking to when I hiked into Region G, the only time I hunted the opener for rifle.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, man, I got this place to myself. And the next thing you know, you see headlights coming up the trailhead, headlights coming over the ridge top, headlights. I mean, but that still didn't hold a candle to the traffic jam I had when I tried to pull out onto the highway and drive down to the spot I was going to glass that morning for elk in Arizona.
Yeah.
And most people, when they draw an Arizona elk tag, they're like, I did it.
Finally
I hit
got it. Yep.
Got it. This is going to be an awesome hunt. And they get there, and it's like, there's a reason they call this the general elk hunt for Arizona.
Yeah.
No, and a lot of times, too, like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people in the woods that aren't even hunting. Like up in northern Utah with my buddy that had that tag, I've never seen so many side-by-sides and dirt bikers and people camping in my life. Like, they were everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, of course, if you're not, you're thinking right away, oh, all these guys are hunting. But then you're like, well, there's only 7 tags here. So most of these people aren't hunting. But, yeah, it's easy to – traffic can discourage a guy quick.
I'm just thinking back on it, and my wife drew an antlerless Shiras moose tag.
I remember that.
It was the only hunt during that time frame. The bull hunt was going on, but there's only 5 tags.
Yeah.
There's not a first rifle elk. There's no deer hunts going on. We get to the spot, and there is a solid row of traffic at daylight going up this road. I'm like, what in the sweet Jesus is going on up here? You start looking, and it's just every single person that was going by was going to see the Leafs in early October.
Yeah.
It was close to Denver, and I mean, actually the cow moose she shot, we had to wait for 2 bicyclists to drive off from taking photos of this moose that was sitting off the side of the road.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we conversed with the ladies right there, and they were just taking pictures of this moose, and they're like, oh, you guys are hunting, huh? Yeah.
That's the one right there.
Yeah. You want to film it?
Yeah. But it's something that you don't expect. And there was,
bet.
I mean, as many people as I've ever seen in the field, but nobody was hunting. You know, they were all just sightseeing.
Yeah, and I've seen that too, where just even the hunters were out there and they're camped and stuff like you were saying on your 27 hunt, but they're not hunting the same places that I was hunting. You know, I was getting back in. A lot of those guys were camping and only going maybe a mile or so, and whether that's just how they wanted to hunt or that was their physical ability to do that. And you can get a little frustrated right there at the camp or at the trailhead, and then, man, but you get back in a ways and you kind of got it to yourself then too. So, yeah, and it's all about how much effort you want to put in or what you're capable of putting into it.
Yeah, and for, that kind of goes back to before you put in for hunts, make sure and do a little bit of legwork and homework in advance. And
not
decide
just
if
looking at the tag numbers for that.
Tag numbers, harvest success, things like that can be pretty misleading. Make sure that it's going to fit your hunting style. If you're a person that's easily discouraged by hunter crowding and hunters, you might want to maybe apply for something with fewer tags.
Yep.
Or if you're a person that maybe doesn't have the means to get out, like you're talking, like hike in there 2 or 3 miles or have stock that'll take you back in 4 or 5 miles, maybe select a unit that's got more roads to spread everyone out a little bit more, that gives you more options, because physically that's where you're at.
Yeah, you bet. You can get around and look at more country that way, and that. So, yeah, that's what makes it a lot of fun. Is there's different areas for different people.
Yep.
I prefer just getting on private land.
That
eliminates a lot of it.
That can be a great option if you have that option.
That's the best option.
Yeah,
No,
probably.
I mean, honestly, like it's tougher to find access now, but I mean, I always tell guys, if you got something good going, like, don't ever let it go. Like, even if, people are prodding at you like, oh, you hunt private land, well, take advantage of it while it lasts.
Yep, you bet.
Well, let me ask you this. How many times do we get the call of, I would love to find some private land trespass. I would be willing to pay for a trespass fee, but I can't afford a guided hunt. Short of saying, yeah, you and everybody else, because everyone else is looking for that great private land experience, and as expensive as outfitted hunts are nowadays, you can't hardly find one that's real. I mean, that's reasonable for the common man. Yeah. They're expensive.
They are.
So trying to find that private trespass fee is almost impossible at this point in time, and it's because, twofold. Someone already has it tied up that Joner's told him not to ever let it go, so now it's never going to see the light of day again.
Yep.
Or an outfitter looked at the situation and said, hey, that's an easy place for me to run my clients. Goes to the landowner and says, I know you're peddling these trespass fees, but guess what? I'll pay you more than what you're making on your trespass fees, and you only have to deal with me.
Yep.
Not Joe, Tom, and everybody else.
Yep. You'll know who's on here and who's taking care of it.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Now, and another thing, I mean, I think a lot of guys, that think they're going to hike into the backcountry or 10 miles in to get away from people. It can be done, but remember, if you get an elk on the ground, it's a lot of work to pack an elk. I mean, anything over 4 miles with the elk, I don't like it all.
No.
It's, especially early September when it's hot, it's a big project to get a bull out, get the meat taken care of and everything. So, just because you're in good shape and think you can get back in somewhere, remember, the work only begins once the animal's on the ground. So.
And one thing I would say to point out, just in a prior podcast we were touching on, you're not the only one back there. Yeah. Most of the time they think if you go back far enough, you'll lose people. Well, everyone else can get back there too. So if you can get there, so can someone else. And so that's the one thing. You're going to run out of a lot more of the people, but don't be defeated if you get back there and there's a big outfitter camp set up and there's tents everywhere. You know what I mean? It happens.
Oh, that's one thing I try to do is if I'm planning on going back in somewhere, I'll Google, outfitters in Gunnison and see if they're doing drop camps, because that's another thing. Where we hunted in Colorado a couple of years ago, we thought we were going to be the only ones up in here, and lo and behold, here's 3 drop camps. We're
right on top.
And we hiked in with camp on our back 6.5 miles, and it's not like you can just easily relocate. We were committed.
Yeah.
And so then we were having to hike another 3 miles from camp each day just to get away from those guys. So, just doing your research, even looking on detailed imagery on X, Google Earth. Sometimes you can zoom in and see wall tents set up and be like, ooh, I might want to avoid this spot.
Yep. Yeah. Been guys here before and probably going to be again.
Yeah. The one thing I always take note of, though, even if I run in, just kind of put that in perspective, that's the kind of hunting I like. I do love to get back and stay there. As long as it's not just flat miserable weather. We had some pretty rough conditions that time. But we made it work, and that's the kind of hunting I like and enjoy. And as long as you, the one thing you can control throughout that entire hunt or your season, you can put yourself in the position that you enjoy the most. You can't control what these other hunters do. You can't control if there's some drop camps in there. But as long as you're putting yourself in the situation or the kind of hunting you enjoy, it's going to be a fun hunt.
Oh, you bet. Control what you can control.
Yep.
And that I've been told that for years by my dad and some of the older guys that I hunted with, and that's all you can do.
Yep.
And heck, that's a little bit of the unknown. That's kind of what makes it fun to me. Heck, if I knew what was going to happen every time, I may not get up so early.
Oh, I'd be bored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, those are definitely the hunts you remember when
Yeah.
everything goes south and you're scrambling and panicked and trying to figure out what your next move is. And, those are the ones that you think back on. And
Yeah, you bet. And then if you're able to make that adjustment and make it successful, either by killing an animal or whatever, then they're really great.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, just having, like, if you find yourself constantly being frustrated with the conditions and, say, the lack of trophies or the lack of the animals that used to be there, or there's tons of hunters in the field, and, man, I just really didn't think it was going to be like this going into it, just try and get a decent frame of mind around, or change your expectations back to the point, like, I'm hunting. At the end of the day, I get to go out and be in the field, and you're supposed to forget about your problems, not invent some to worry about.
Yeah.
Don't make more problems for yourself. That's why you go hunting, to get away from problems.
Absolutely. I know that's why I go. Yeah.
No. Yeah, I mean, just always, now just remember there are no secrets anymore.
No.
Like, there's been someone before you and there's going to be someone
Yep.
after you. And I used to get so frustrated to be like, that's my secret spot. Why is someone, it's like, it's public land. Like, someone else put in just as much work as you did to find it. And you can't let it ruin your hunt.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. If it's a true secret spot, it's probably so secretive that the game doesn't even know about it. So you're not going to have to worry about it anyway. So
Yeah, when it comes down to it, one thing that I heard, and I don't know, I can't remember where I heard it, but when they say, there was a saying, it's a you problem.
yeah.
Well, a you problem is one you've created for yourself,
Yep.
not that someone created for you. And more often than not, problems that happen to you while you're out hunting are a you problem.
Yeah.
You choose to get upset about it. You choose to make it a problem, or you can choose to make it a non-issue.
Yeah.
And if you can get that frame of mind where you're choosing to make it a non-issue and you just roll with the punches, I can tell you your hunts are far greater, funner. You feel more accomplished when you come out. You feel rested when you come out of the field
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yep. Oh, yeah. You got to laugh it off. I try to laugh stuff off. I mean, I screw stuff up every day, and hunting is one of them, and I just got to laugh it off anymore. So, yeah, you usually bring most of that on yourself, and, hell, that's all right. That's part of being human. So.
I used to get upset when I'd miss a coyote until I got to the point where I'm like, it won't be the last.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll miss another
I
one.
know. I still get upset a little bit because, man, that's one thing I hate to miss. It's a coyote. So, yeah.
well, I would love to say give us a call and we can help you with this problem, but I think we're just going to tell you to man up, get out there, go have a fun time, and, make the most of it, because time is precious. It's valuable. Don't get upset and frustrated, and, hunting's, it's to go relax and chill and not get all worked up over. So,
Yeah. Yep, you bet. We can probably help you narrow down a spot or two, but it may not be the best in the world either. So,
Hey,
yeah.
It might be our secret spot, and then next year it's everyone's secret
Yeah.
spot.
Yep, you bet.
no, I mean, we love to help people out, but we can't wave the magic wand and tell you where to go. I mean, it's literally boots on the ground experience each day in the field that's going to give you success.
That's
So,
most of the fun, figuring it out.
You bet. Got to be out there. So beats the heck out of being in the office. I can tell you that.
That's
so.
right.
yeah, so for any other questions besides where to go hunting and where not to run into people,
Yeah.
we'd love to help you out. So give us a call here in the office at 435-865-1020, and good luck.